But I guess that's partially due to the storm as well. I think people are really struggling to not only to clean up their properties, but to catch up on things because of the things that have happened over the last few days. So welcome. My name is Janette Hughes, and I am the Canada Research Chair in the Faculty of Education at Ontario Tech. I do work in the area of STEAM education, technology and pedagogy, digital citizenship, and for the last 5 or 6 years, production pedagogies or movies, and that's one of the things that we're talking about tonight. Laura couldn't make it tonight because she's actually teaching in the grad course tonight, so she's teaching from 6 to 9. And as I mentioned, Devin is with us. Devin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Devin Flynn. I am a graduate student with the STEAM 3D Maker Lab at Ontario Tech University, and I will eventually be working on my thesis under Dr. Janette Hughes.
Great, and thanks again, Devin, for dropping everything at the last minute to join us and make sure this goes smoothly. Devin did just let me know that my audio is a little choppy, so I've just turned off my camera. Is that better, Devin? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay. Let me know, and we can try something else. I have another hub I could actually switch to if I absolutely have to. Okay, so could you actually go back to the previous slide, Devin, for me? I also have Devin helping me with the recording and with the moving of slides just to reduce the demand on my bandwidth. So tonight we're going to be talking about virtually making code plus math. And this was a project that we did with the Rainy River District School Board, so a northern board, last year during COVID. And we're going to be talking about promising practices for online coding, math, and making professional learning. So this is really focused in on professional development, or we like to call it professional learning. Okay, so take us to the third slide, Devin. Thanks. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about is what makes certain professional learning experiences more rewarding than others. So I wanted to collect your thoughts on this. If you could go to the Padlet at the link there, and Devin has just put it in the chat for us. Thanks, Devin. I would like you to share some of the rewarding experiences you have had in professional learning sessions, just so that we can kind of get a barometer for what kinds of things you think or you've experienced at work for professional learning. And we'll just, okay, none of my none of my revisions stuck, but that's okay. We can still use this. So I'm assuming most of you have used a Padlet before. All you really have to do is click on the little plus at the bottom to share, and then click on the Padlet, and you can write your response. So I'm going to go over there as well, so that I can see what you're writing. Oh, good, and Devin's got it open too. So when staff can make personal connections with each other prior to new learning. Yes, PD also needs to be targeted to teacher groups. It's not one size fits all. I want us to be able to talk about some of these things in more detail too. We'll wait until other people have weighed in. One of the findings that we discovered in the research that we did was that coming to a PD session with someone else is often really beneficial because it supports the learning and because it draws on a socio-constructivist approach. That is, speaking to each other or learning together and talking about that learning, which supports deeper learning. Yes, the ability to do the content, math tasks and coding, working with peers to deepen understanding. Yes, agreed. I also wanted to say a little bit about it's not one size fits all. I completely agree with this. Often what we see in professional development, especially if it's district-wide professional learning, is that the board decides what the focus is going to be based on their strategic plans. And then everybody is sort of expected to do that professional development in that area. It's not really something that the teachers have identified as something that they need. And I like the use of the term critical friend as well. Yes, a supportive critical friend, really important. And building a network of connections. So I'm seeing a theme here about how important it is to learn with others and share resources. Okay, and time. Time is probably the most valuable commodity. I hear this over and over again when we work with teachers, that we need time, right? To co-plan, to leave with something that can be used with students right away. There's actually some research that supports the idea that if you don't use professional learning after a session within 48 to 72 hours after experiencing it, after that training, and I really dislike the word training, but after the professional learning experience, you won't use it. It'll be just something that you move further and further away from. It's hard to come back to it. Usually when we leave professional learning experiences, we're very excited to get going. And so if that doesn't happen right away, then it's not likely to happen. And so given that there are only about 5 of you in this session, I think we've probably heard from most of you, and maybe some of you more than once. I agree too, whoever wrote PD, that's iterative and cyclical, not a one-time thing. And all of these things are actually really supported in the literature, which I guess we'll talk about now. If we go back to the slide, Stefan. So thanks so much for your input on that. Maybe if you could just drop in the chat too, what is your role? Like, are you coming to us as teachers? And if so, what grades are you teaching? Are you facilitators? It would be helpful as we move through to know who we're actually speaking with and working with tonight. So if you just pop that in the chat, that would be helpful for us. Devin, why don't you start us off? What's your focus?
Oh, wait, I was supposed to put it in the chat.
Oh, you can talk since you have your mic on.
I'll kind of do both. So my focus tends to be IS. So I'm a high school teacher, trained a little bit more in biology and general science, but I also got my background in senior social science and hopefully geography soon. So it's a lot of STEAM subjects and with more of a high school focus for me. And I'm currently a grad student, so.
Great, thank you for sharing. And Diane is here. Diane is a colleague of mine, ours. So Diane teaches pre-service teachers to teach coding and to teach mathematics. And I know the students really appreciate your class. I'm just looking through the rest of the list. We have high school teacher, transitioning to VP position. That is very exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about administrative support for professional learning tonight. And we've got a TC in the IS stream. Wonderful for you to take time out to be here. Phys Ed and Bio, great. You're doing your online semester, so that's wonderful. Vicky has a background in corporate training, current role with federal government, more about self-learning. I hope to apply learning experiences from my on-tech courses to opportunities that arise. Excellent. So are you in our master's program, Vicky?
Hi, here I am. No, no, I'm in the AEDT program,
Oh, yeah, okay,
BA program part-time, and I just sort of started that a few months ago. BA, yeah.
excellent, excellent. And Shamila, you're coming to us from Kingston. Excellent. Elementary teacher, but currently the innovation and technology enabled learning support teacher. So that's a board level job or yeah, role. Excellent. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. So that gives us an idea of who's in the room, and we can tailor our remarks a little bit better for you. So in terms of this research project, and we got a little bit of funding to do this project through the Math Knowledge Network, which is funded through the Fields Institute. And the Fields Institute gets their funding from the Ministry of Education. So really it's a Ministry of Education funded project through Fields, and then funneled through a specialty organization called the Math Knowledge Network. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it, but we have additional funding from them again this year. And we're doing a similar project, which Devin is very much involved with. But this particular project happened not this past term, but in 2021, January 2021. So about a year ago, a year and a half ago. So of course, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and there was a shift to emergency remote teaching. Teachers had very limited preparation and support. And then on top of that, the new Ontario math curriculum was announced, and that includes coding, as you probably know. So suddenly we had this need for teachers to understand how to facilitate meaningful learning experiences online, and many of them had not. In fact, statistically, it was reported at that time at least when the pandemic first hit in 2020, only 15% of Ontario teachers felt capable or qualified to teach their classes fully online. So there was a lot of, as you know, angst and struggle around that. So because our research projects mainly got put on the back burner because of COVID, because the lab was shuttered, we decided that we would help out. And what better way to help out than to support teachers? So giving back to the community that we all belong to. So what we did was we designed a whole series of professional learning sessions, and virtual, of course, focused on math, coding, and making for teachers. And we already had a partnership with this particular school district. So we approached them first and said, would you like to be part of a pilot project? We're designing these professional learning sessions, and we'd really like to try them out before we introduce them to a wider field. So next slide, Devin. And next one. So I'm not going to take you through a lot of this, especially given that I don't think that there are any grad students in this audience. I thought there might be more grad students in our program. But I will just say that we did our research before we decided to create these sessions so that we would know what the literature said about good professional learning online. What does that look like? And we found a few things out. First of all, that there is limited access to quality professional learning in remote locations, and that's partly because of time to travel to different places, the cost of that travel, the cost of running the sessions, from getting people where they need to be, but also the cost of supply coverage. And in fact, even the whole issue of coverage in the board that we worked in, even if they could afford to give teachers coverage so that they could be released to come to professional learning sessions, there were not enough supply teachers to draw upon. So that was just not an option. We also found that online professional learning can fill needs gaps in terms of things like, and you talked about this on the Padlet, connecting with others, the importance of self-directed learning, as well as, the length of certain sessions, given how tapped teachers are already, how much time that they have to spare, which is not a lot, and also access. And so even though we were dealing with a remote board, one of the things that they really made a priority was access for all of their teachers to be able to do online professional learning, because it was important. Geographically, they're huge, right? So it was important to be able to get people to these sessions virtually, because it was difficult to do physically. And then we looked at the promising practices for virtual math PE professional learning, and there is not a lot out there on that. The most important thing is that the literature, other previous research studies indicate that there needs to be a mix of modes. And I'll talk a little bit about the blending of synchronous and asynchronous when we get into the actual study. But the importance of flexibility, the nature of the tasks that are given, the establishment of a community and how important personal learning networks are, and also how important it is when you're introducing new technologies, something like coding, for example, and giving teachers the time that they need to actually explore the tools within the context of their subject matter, which is really important. We're not about teaching coding for the sake of coding. We're really interested in teaching, because we don't need a whole generation of programmers. What we're really interested in doing is teaching coding because of the skills that it fosters. Things like critical thinking and decision making and problem solving, and even creativity and collaboration and communication. And then there were also considerations for online professional learning. There are issues connected to deep and meaningful connections and learning, and also school distractions. And we'll talk a little bit about how each of those played a part in this study. So we'll go to the next slide. And again, I won't spend much time on this because we don't have a lot of grad students who would be terribly interested in this, but I know some of you might be still. But we use a constructionist approach, which was initially introduced by Seymour Papert, who talked a lot about the importance of having tasks that have a low floor and a high ceiling. So that's one of the principles we always use. So for example, when we're using a technology, we want it to be, we want kindergarten students to be able to use it, but we also want it to be sophisticated enough in terms of its capabilities that an adult could use it as well. Kind of like a good picture book, right? A really good picture book is something that the youngest and the oldest can really enjoy. And we also focus on maker-pedagogies, and that's specifically critical making, which is focused on by Matt Ratto from U of T, Yasmin Kafai, who's a researcher out of the US, who actually studied under Seymour Papert and was at MIT with him. And then Will Wind, who's not, and et al. And her colleagues at out of Australia. And then we also looked at the principles of the community of inquiry. So if anybody has questions about that afterwards, maybe we can revisit it, but I won't spend any more time on it now. We want to get into the meat of the playing around with things. So the next slide, Devin. So just to give you a better sense of exactly what did we do with these teachers, we approached the director of the board. She identified, or she put out an invitation to her educators, and 27 different teachers signed up, which is actually a lot when you consider the kinds of time commitments they had, and the fact that there was a pandemic, and the fact that you know, they were doing something new, teaching online for the first time. But they recognized that they had a need, and so they willingly signed up. They were not coerced at all. It was entirely optional. We used a qualitative approach. We were really interested in their experiences, And so we ran the sessions, and then we looked at the kinds of things they told us about the sessions in terms of the data that we collected, and then afterwards analyzed. So we had 6 one-hour synchronous sessions in Microsoft Teams, and we used Teams only because that was the platform that the board was already using, and we wanted to reduce the cognitive burden on teachers. We didn't want to have to get them to try to figure out something else, learn something else on top of everything. So we were very much about supporting and not adding to their stress. So we did a mixture of sandbox, and by sandbox we mean sort of sessions where they could get into the technology and just play around, and also focused learning. We took our lead from the teachers. We asked them what it was they wanted to have more knowledge about and of, and then we went from there. So we very much believe in teacher agency and giving them choice, because they know best what they need and where their strengths lie. So as I said, it was a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning. We had a video recordings, which I'm going to share with you. And you're going to get a chance towards the end of this to really get in and look at the resources that we used and which are available to teachers in Ontario. And then we can talk about them and the technologies that were involved. Any of the synchronous sessions ranged from about 8 participants to 15, but a lot more of them participated asynchronously because then they had time to do it at their own pace. And we'll talk about the pros and cons. So next slide. So we'll just very quickly go over what we found before we jump into the actual resources. So I've identified, I think, 5 themes for you. The first one is that it was really important to balance sandbox kind of play and experimentation with focused learning sessions. And the focused learning was specific to the new math curriculum. And for each of these, I've just highlighted a quote from one of the participants, just to give you a sense of the kinds of things they were saying. So this participant said, getting a chance to play in the programs and have questions answered so readily was excellent. So that was one of the advantages of being at the synchronous sessions, were that you got immediate feedback. Whereas the teachers who came and watched the videos, they were still able to ask questions, but they did it asynchronously on Teams, and we were able to get to them. And often what happened is one of their colleagues or peers would respond before we had a chance, even though we were on top of it. But I really liked the fact that they were supporting each other as well as getting support from us. So the second theme was the importance of including both synchronous and asynchronous options. And I think this should be the standard for all online teaching, as opposed to all one or all the other. Nothing beats the blend of the two. So this participant says, sometimes I couldn't make it, and it was okay. I could go back, and I like that. All the sessions were still available. I was super interested in CoSpaces, which is one of the platforms we used with them. One of the meetings I missed, there was a lot of info about CoSpaces. So I watched the session, and again, then they asked questions about that, and they got support from each other. So it's really important, especially in terms of access, because not everybody has equal access, and the digital divide is more now about quality of bandwidth than it is about whether or not we have devices in our households. In many cases, and this is not for the teachers, but well, even for some of the teachers, but our students, we found that many students were sharing devices, and if you had 3 children and parents all trying to use the internet, and I learned this personally with my family, but you're competing for that precious bandwidth, and in some cases you're competing to get on the one family computer. So this was an issue for teachers who were teaching online, but who also had their own children as students learning online. Okay, so theme 3. The importance of collaboration and a virtual platform to support it. So you've all touched on that when we looked at the Padlet. Collaboration is really important. At any time, this participant said we could just post questions up onto the Teams and we could get answers when they were needed. So really important. I won't say much more about that because we've talked about it. So theme 4, the importance of ongoing exposure to maker professional learning, facilitated virtually during the pandemic. One of you mentioned this too in the Padlet, how it's iterative, right? And it's the kind of support that we were offering was not just let's all get together, do a session, and then you're on your own. It was very much over you know, about a 3-month period, so that they felt that they were getting constant support. Sorry, I'm just checking out the chat. Yes, Diane. Yeah, I think it is important at any level, pre-service, in service. So this participant said for teachers, they've had a little bit of time to try it with students, even though it's been online. But now in planning for next year, when the math curriculum does come out, it is brand new and you know they're all looking at it, trying to figure out what the new things are. Being able to have that background knowledge a little bit about some of the programs, you know, it's not this one-time thing. They're going to know and be able to incorporate it in. This was a comment actually from one of the math facilitators in the board. And I think that was really important. And I'll talk a little bit about what we learned from this project in terms of how we did things and how we changed things up this year when we did a second iteration of it with another board. Okay, theme 5, I think this is the last one. Yes, there definitely were challenges related to virtual maker professional learning. When we think about making, we think about being in a maker space and all the stuff is there, all the materials, all the technology, and everybody's working together and it's almost like this hive of activity. And suddenly we're trying to do, you know, and my lab does research on this. So suddenly we're trying to do making online where people are individually at their computers and they don't have the stuff that they need. So that was a huge challenge for us. And I think that it was challenging on the other end as well, but also because, you know, they were teaching online all day and then having to come to a professional learning session, which was then on screen as well, was, I think, really exhausting for them. So that was probably the biggest challenge that we had. So you can move on to the next slide, Devin. Yeah, so the educational significance. So one of the things that we learned from this first iteration of the project, and so we're doing it again this year. So we're in the middle of it. We're almost finished. We've got the last sessions coming up this, I think they finish up at the beginning of June. We're working with 2 school districts this time. And we're doing things a little bit differently. One of the things that we've changed is we still did the asynchronous and the synchronous. First of all, we did synchronous sessions for all the teachers, and then we did provided them with some asynchronous materials. But the thing that we've added was we have gone into, so we've met with teachers individually. And then we've gone into their classes virtually. And in one case, we did an actual physical visit. And so what they're getting then is, you know, they've sort of gotten all the background information. They've done the playing. We've worked with them to co-plan their lessons according to their curricular expectations. And then we went into their classes, as I said, virtually to support them. So we call that just in time support as opposed to just in case, which is what a lot of professional learning by school districts is sort of spray and pray, it sticks kind of approach. Let's, like, you know, let's do the PD for everybody and maybe it'll stick with, you know, a certain percentage of them. And then, you know, maybe we'll have a district wide spread or maybe we won't. So we learned, and we knew these things from previous studies, but it was really reinforced with us that professional learning needs to meet the needs of teachers. It needs to be relevant and responsive to their needs, and it needs to be agentive. So they need agency. Teachers need agency in deciding what professional learning they'll do. And so it can't be top down. The other thing that we learned was related to content. Coding should be taught in the context of the subject matter or the curriculum expectations that that teachers are working with, and specific to the grade level. And now that it is embedded in the curriculum, I think it's much better. When coding became suddenly a huge kind of bandwagon phenomenon, it started with Hour of Code. And so you had teachers all over North America, possibly, you know, many places in the Western world, just having students do an hour of code. And, you know, it was great. They loved it. It was very successful. But what really were they learning in terms of transfer of those skills? So embedding it and anchoring it with math or science or even social studies or literacy, something is really important. And it needs to be interactive and supported by a maker approach, which is, you know, the opposite of what I'm doing right now, which is talking to you. So let's get through this so that you can play. The last thing I'll say is that the environment needs to be flexible. And we talked about that in terms of time and space and platform. It needs to be supportive and it needs to be collaborative, because learning floats on a sea of talk with each other. So without further ado, next slide. We're providing you with links on the next two slides to each of the lessons that we used in this in these professional learning sessions. So what you'll see if you go, actually, Devin, I can't see the slide anymore.
Sorry, just 1 second. I was just trying to copy the link.
It's okay. I just want to, before we move, to look at these things. Yeah, okay. So what you'll see is beside each title, so for example, the first one here on the screen is Little Gardeners lesson plan. You'll see the grade level or the division level, so that's junior intermediate. And then you'll see the main technology that we used to facilitate the math and science connections. So musical patterns is suitable for primary, junior, or intermediate, depending on how you present it. And the technology there is makey, etc. So if you're a high school teacher, you want to hit one of the intermediate ones. But we'll let you choose. And what you'll see there is you'll see a video, which is a member of my team who created the lesson in conjunction with a math expert and myself. And it basically walks teachers through, and that would be the asynchronous kind of piece, and then the slides that we actually use. And I would ask you to please, if you're going to use one, please don't share it with anybody else. It is a resource that we have online that we use with teachers. So we would appreciate it. So basically they're copyrighted, but we're sharing them with you for the purposes of this session. So we only have about 20 minutes. So go and play, and then we'll come back and we'll have a conversation. Take about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a 5-minute check-in. Devin, have you seen all of these now?
All of these lessons?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just about all of them. Some that I've used directly and some of them that I've just done on my own because they're fun. Animal migration is a great one. Little gardeners as well.
I'm kind of partial to baby sea turtles and fireworks.
I like the fireworks too. I just never had the setup at home in order to play with that one yet, but they are really cool.
The next, so just to answer your question, Devin, the next session starts at 7. So we were asked to be about 45 minutes, but I think there's some leeway.
Right.
If anybody has questions as you go through, we're certainly willing to chat. We don't have to wait the full 15 minutes. We're here.
Hi, Janet. Can I ask a question?
Sure can.
Just out of curiosity, did you get a lot of feedback from teachers about when, say, the students weren't able to get the software or the applications needed for the learning? Like what their workaround was for that?
So in the case, so we always checked, first of all, whether the teacher would be able to either get them the technology, or we used online versions of things. And for the example of CoSpaces, the lab has a license for that. So if the board didn't get a license, and they actually did end up getting a license, but they wanted to try it, test drive it first, right? So we let them use our seats. So we did all the setting up of all of that for them. And we did have a little bit of funding to provide them with some of the technology.
Okay.
But when we first started talking with the director about this, we asked them, what technologies do you have available for students to use and for teachers to use? And so they identified some of them. In the example of CoSpaces, we thought that it was a really timely tool for them to use. Are you familiar with CoSpaces?
No, I'll be quite honest, I'm not familiar with hardly any of this. I'm very curious though.
Okay, so CoSpaces allows students to program while at the same time play around with augmented and virtual reality. Are you going to pull it up, Devin?
Do you want me to pull up the actual CoSpaces or do you want me to just use the slide?
No, use the slide and show us how it works. This is a popular one.
Okay.
Technology for us, yeah. And as I said, this is one that is got low floor, high ceiling, because it can be used with kindergarten students all the way up to even adults love playing with it. So the idea is that you are in this virtual environment, and it's quite easy to program.
Okay.
And as you can see here, you can get the characters saying things, moving, but it's very satisfying because it's quite easy to get a professional looking product very quickly. So it's got, like I said, a low floor.
So that would be very empowering for the students, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But, you know, we know the problem for most teachers is when do they have time to play with something like this?
Yeah.
The only time that they could do it is on their own time, right? So we were trying to give them space and time to do this kind of thing so that they would be comfortable enough with it to go in. But one of the things that we always tell teachers is don't wait until you think you're an expert, because then you'll never start. One of the things that we often say is if you position yourself alongside your students as learners, the most, we just wrote a paper, actually did some research on what are the attributes of good maker teachers, and they're the teachers who are willing to take risks by saying, I don't know how to do this exactly. I can introduce it to you, but let's all play with it together and figure it out. And the students 9 times out of 10 end up knowing more than the teacher within, you know,
Yeah.
you know, a very short period of time. Yeah, so it's very similar to Scratch. I don't know if you're familiar with Scratch, but it's drag and drop kind of coding.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very satisfying. It's a bit more sophisticated than Scratch. And if you have the app on a device like an iPad or an iPhone, or you're able to then you can create something like those polar bears, for example. You could then use the app to make those polar bears come up off the screen, similar to Pokemon Go.
Okay.
It's a really good tool too for student creativity, because when you kind of get them to work on activities and then you give them the time to explore and expand on like what they could do in the space or the scene that they have, you get to see what they can create, and it gets really interesting because students probably have more creativity than us adults sometimes. So it's really neat to see what they can do and the different things that they add and how they make things come to life in that respect.
And that you can see it immediately, right? It's like there's no waiting.
Mm-hmm. Which is the really cool thing with code spaces, because you can immediately add things and then you can immediately code those things, so you can see in real time like how your code is impacting something. So it's a good tool for like creativity, but also for that coding learning as well.
That's great. I really appreciate you showing this. This is terrific.
I'm just looking for the link where you can find all of this. I think it's at learnx.ca. I'll put the link in the chat for you.
Okay, great.
There are other things here as well. Here we are. Yeah, so you have to scroll down, but there's a whole resource here. I'll put the link in. There are lots of other resources, but if you scroll down to about the middle, you will find, okay, now I have too many tabs open. Here we go. There you go.
Oh, okay, great.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? they did ask us to wrap up, try to wrap up around 15 minutes before the hour to give people time to get a, coffee or glass of wine or whatever you want to do, take a bio break. We'll just hang in there until just before 7, in case there are any more questions, but I want to thank you for coming. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you get a chance to explore some of those resources, and I wish you well.
Thank you. This is actually very helpful for an assignment I'm working on, actually. So this is,
Good.
yeah, this has really helped me a lot. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks, Devin. My technology didn't fail me completely, which is good.
Yeah, I think it worked out really well.
Okay. Is that all you need to do tonight? Or do you have another session to go to?
That's it for me.
Okay. I've got another one. I'm not sure when. Let me look at my calendar.
I think your next one is 8 o'clock.
Yes, I have 2
'Cause
at 8 o'clock.
double book
I have to
8.
split it. Yeah, I got to check in with Tess. Okay. All right. See you on the other side.
Yeah, you don't need me anymore for the rest of the night, do you?
I do not. Thanks so much.
Okay, sounds
Enjoy
good.
your evening.
I shall see you later. Take care.
Tomorrow, probably, right?
Yeah, because I have my session tomorrow.
Okay. See you then.
Have a good night.